All right, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Planet Green Trees. Call number is 1-347-326-9626. We're going to get right into it here with our two special guests. We have on the phone with us, I believe, Stacy Theis and Kari Boiter. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Kari.
Welcome, Kari. And Stacy, do we have you there as well?
Hi, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Let's make sure I can coordinate this. Kari, of course, is the champion a cause for the drug war prisoners and criminal justice reform. She was named Patient Advocate of the Year by the ASA and is actively involved with some of the outrageous prisoners of the drug wars and mandatory minimum sentencings of the like of Chris Williams. And I know she's on the board at co-founder of ASA-Washington and as well as the president of the board of directors for the Cannabis Defense Coalition. Did I get all that right?
Yeah, geez, what a mouthful.
And let me just introduce Stacy. Stacy, of course, is a marijuana activist, writer, promoter, developer of the West Valley NORML and Cannasense program, as well as the owner of the CannaBus, which is being driven around the country to help educate people about cannabis on the CannaBus Freedom Tour. All right, so we've gotten that out of the way. Let me start with you, Kari, if we can, especially from Washington. I guess I was asked this question earlier today. What are your thoughts on this Washington State raid by the federal government going into a medical marijuana facility? We're not even talking about one of the adult, legalized for recreational purposes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have been going around the country advocating for medical marijuana providers, patients, caregivers who are going to prison or are in federal prison for obeying state law. So it doesn't really shock me, I can't say. I've been kind of waiting for this to happen. They have not given us the green light for recreational stores or certainly medical either. We have two jurisdictions in Washington similar to Michigan, and in eastern Washington, they are prosecuting people rampantly. And in western Washington, there's been sort of a bubble of safety here. People think that they are immune. And, actually, as it turns out, just within the last half hour, the federal government has gone back in and raided a second time one of the collectives that they raided yesterday. So they very clearly are not done sending whatever message it is they're trying to send here.
Well, you brought up a really important point, which is that there hasn't been a green light given. Has there been a posting of any traffic signal at all? I mean, aren't we still awaiting the federal government's position on Colorado's legalization and Washington's legalization? Or did I miss something and Holder actually gave some kind of announcement?
No, he's been very clear that they won't say anything at all and that they'll have an announcement soon. We'll have one soon. They haven't said when soon will be, and so far that's been going on since November of last year, obviously. But no announcement has been made very clearly. And if you look at what they're doing in western Washington and eastern Washington, they just sent 16 warning letters within the last couple of months to dispensaries over here in western Washington. So to me, I think their message and their announcement is pretty clear every time they make one of these actions happen.
It's awful. And for those, many people know, and the reason why these individuals are in federal prison and the needs to support them is that when you get to federal court, and even if you're in compliance with state law, you can't talk about it. And the federal government turns the facts of the case into what they like to call a drug trafficking trial. And you are left there with no defense, not being able to articulate why you were doing what you were doing. Sometimes it may come into play, but the jury will be instructed in a very formalized, much different than state court, formalized big courtrooms with, and tell the law to the jury to not include any concepts of medical marijuana. It is an outrageous position to be in. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I've unfortunately been in some situations where we've had to lie in the case by order of the court and not able to assert the truth. And officers are lying to not talk about a card. And I wanted, before we go to Stacy, I want to ask you one thing. Is you mentioned that that the western part of the state is still being gotten at. Are you talking federally, or I guess the better question is, how is the state dealing with it? Are there still state prosecutions, or are they backed off? I mean, I know there's a bunch of possession cases that were, dismissed when the legalization bill passed, but felony grows, or people that are over their limits, maybe outside of they get prosecuted. How are those cases resolving in state court, if you know?
Well, these raids actually that have just happened are a result of state court action. The state, or well, I should say the local counties and of course state task force as well, came in a couple years ago now and raided all of the people that were raided by the federal government yesterday. And so, where the state doesn't prosecute or chooses not to, the federal government will certainly willingly pick that up. And whether it's a matter of them choosing to pick it up without the state asking them to, or whether it's the state saying, hey, our laws aren't working, but yours will, come help us, we don't know how it's happening, but certainly a lot of these cases that are federal do involve people who in some way were involved in challenging the state law, whether it's actually challenging it in court or, being a lobbyist and changing it at the legislative level and being really out front of the activist fight that way. It does typically stem from the state. And in Washington, much like Michigan again, we have certain jurisdictions that are just known for being ruthless. There is no medical defense in some of these places. And so that's, you've got that on the state level. And then in the federal level, of course, like you mentioned, there's no defense period. So even if the jury knew, because it was a well-publicized case, that the defendant was a patient and a caregiver, or even if you did get the cards entered in as evidence, like you mentioned, the instructions are very clear that they are not to consider the state law, that federally that is the law they're there to consider, and federally it is against the Controlled Substances Act. Whether you're trafficking marijuana for an international cartel, or you're providing it for your grandma who has cancer, or you're just providing it for yourself and you've got 3 plants, a drug trafficker is a drug trafficker under federal law.
Are they prosecuting it? So I'm imagining this, like you just described, there have been state investigations or raids. Those did not result in any kind of charges being brought, but the investigation itself and what was gathered was turned over to the federal government, and they now have re-raided, and probably indictments will follow. Is that how I'm hearing that?
Yeah, it's a very tangled web. There's a lot of flow back and forth. So, for example, when warning letters were given to businesses, about 30 of them in the Seattle area a year and a half ago now, at least one of those people I know of ended up facing charges on the state level. And because they didn't want to go to federal court, where it's even more unfair, they chose to go ahead and plead to something in the local level, where they knew that at least at sentencing, the state law on medical marijuana would be considered. So, there's certain jurisdictions who are choosing to prosecute. There's others who will prosecute. There's others who choose not to because they know they'll lose, and in that case, the feds end up prosecuting. And there's some who, we would think that Seattle isn't going to support it at all, but one of the businesses raided yesterday was a Seattle business. And so I guess we will find out just how far these elected officials in the city of Seattle are willing to go to bat for marijuana. One of them was the prime sponsor of Initiative 502, the Seattle city attorney. So I'm really curious to see what he will do about this dispensary in his city being raided.
Were the warning letters from the state government agencies or the federal agencies?
It's from federal, and it's, the new tactics that they're taking, because they are facing a lot of backlash when they do these highly publicized raids, guns drawn, the media comes out, they cover it, and it's not always friendly for the DEA. So a much less exciting tactic is letters that they send to people, and they threaten them to take away every bit of property they have and prosecute them if they don't close their business. And so most of the time people, once again, fearing the federal government, just go ahead and shut down, and they don't challenge it. And that's the difference, is that these 4 dispensaries who were raided yesterday did choose to continue on in their business after getting, whether it's the raids on the local level, however it's working out. They chose to not heed the warning, and now it seems that ultimately
unfortunately, they're going to probably pay the price. The second rate today at Bayside Gardens from Olympia, they're actually going after the employees, and they're taking their homes, their cars. These aren't owners. These are employees of these dispensaries, and they've come back a second time. So it's really a serious situation when you involve the DEA, and even a warning letter is enough for most people to go ahead and shut down to avoid prosecution.
I'm aware that, and I remember this so vividly, at the time when Michigan had a reaction to the original Holder Memorandum back in 2010, like October 2010, saying that the federal government wasn't going to, or 2009 maybe, wasn't going to interfere with the states that had legislated medical marijuana and for those people that were in compliance with it. I always use the example of like 4 or 5 or 6 states, Washington being one of them, that spent the next year and a half a lot of lobbying money, a lot of dollars of taxpayers to create a dispensary bill that when it made it to the governor's desk was met at the same mailing time with threats from the DEA or the federal government that if the governor signed that bill, that there was his civil employees that might be handing out those licenses could be charged or would be charged. Am I correct in that factually? And I remember different states took different governors took different approaches. Some amended the laws, some vetoed them, some just signed amendments and said, "Screw you, federal government." Does Washington have a dispensary bill? And if so, how has it been influenced by the DEA?
Our governor was the one who actually sought input from the DEA. She didn't want to sign a bill into law and put her employees in jeopardy. And so the response from the DEA that we will take, civil employees into custody or arrest them, prosecute them, we're not afraid. That was in response to our governor reaching out and asking for guidance. And so rightfully, after she got that memo, she vetoed all the portions of the dispensary bill that would have made safe access possible. There was a small portion of collectives that were allowed, which was originally intended to be patient co-ops, people who were growing together amongst themselves, pooling resources, not storefront models. But, of course, an industry already existed, and so the lawyers quickly found a way to pigeonhole these storefronts and safe access points into the collective garden model that was left over. So there's been some court challenges about that. But what's interesting is in these DEA actions is that the vetoing of the medical marijuana law is the excuse that there could not have been clear and unambiguous compliance here because our bill was vetoed. So therefore, are these dispensaries, are they storefronts, or are they collectives? It's not clear because of the veto, and now that's the excuse that there couldn't have been clear and unambiguous compliance, and therefore they don't fall under the Ogden memo because there is no real clear defined allowance for storefronts here. And in Montana, what they were doing there was trying to make a very, very clear. So you had 4 partners of the same company, Chris Williams being one of them, and his partner, one of them was a lobbyist and one was a lawyer. So they were working to write extremely clear guidelines, being fully aware of the Ogden memo. And they thought if we write black and white guidelines that we know we can abide by because we own this business, then this will all be handled. And the day that they were actually voting on these bills in the legislature is the day that the DEA came and raided 26 businesses. And as a result, 33 people were indicted. 2 of them went to trial out of the 33, another example of the injustice of the federal system. Most of the people cooperated and pled guilty. Some of them actually testified against their former partners and associates to avoid the penalty themselves. And as a result, the law was repealed de facto in Montana, and there's no more medical marijuana program, even for patients, really. It's decimated it to the point that patients, there used to be somewhere around 30,000, and there are about 3,000 now. So it's, they made their action clear, and that had an impact on the state. And obviously it's not supposed to work that way according to the Constitution, that, you're not supposed to commandeer the state legislature when you're the federal government. But it's certainly worked in Montana, and since then the U.S. Attorney has been out bragging to the national media that he successfully did this, and other U.S. attorneys should follow him. He's a great example to follow. So it won't surprise me if we start to see a lot of this stuff where, we're getting close now on the verge. We just had another state pass a medical marijuana bill. And as these state legislatures are considering it, if the federal government goes in there at the same time, they could put a real stop to any sort of legislation. And that's, the medical here does have an impact on recreational. So even though they're two separate laws, our liquor control board that's considering opening up recreational storefronts has certainly got to be questioning, can we do this when these medical storefronts are being shut down and raided with guns drawn, not just given warning letters anymore?
They're disturbingly blurred lines, I must say. And, it's such a fascinating topic, and you've got such great insight into the federal level here and from really the victim side, I would say. We're short on time, but we're going to, I don't want to, because I wanted to give a lot of time to Stacey and get her thoughts on it. So for all the other guests that are waiting, we're going to go a little bit over. I got permission from the producer. So we're going to make sure we get all the content and the discussion out there. But just fascinating stuff. Kari, we're going to have to get you back on if we can. We didn't even get to talk about the prison and system and how they're dealing with it, or some of the other...
even Jerry Duvall and all the...
Yeah, address the Duvall family real quick.
Okay, go ahead. Sure, please.
Well, I will make it very, very quick. We just sent out a second request for compassionate release for Jerry yesterday, and there's a petition on change.org that people can go and sign, and we've gotten 600 signatures in just the last 12 hours thanks to an action alert from ASA that went out. And it is really, really vital right now because Jerry has been denied his anti-rejection medication. He's an organ transplant patient, and he's in a medical prison, and he's not getting his anti-rejection medication. His eye has also hemorrhaged, so he's completely blind in his right eye. He's been in prison less than 6 weeks, so it's really urgent that we try and do something. He's just a patient who is caught in the crossfire between the state and federal law, and he needs our help.
And that, of course, is change.org and under Jerry Duvall?
Yes, D-U-V-A-L.
Okay. Terrible story. All right. Again, thank you very much. I'm going to let you go. We're going to get over to Stacey and get her thoughts on this, but please promise to come back if you would.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. All right, so we're going to move over to Stacey. Stacey, of course, I see in your bio you're a writer, promoter, and activist. I'm curious to know, are you, from your perspective, which is seeing, like you're observing a lot of different portions of what we could describe as a cannabis or medical cannabis community, and you just heard the guest Kari talk about how there's just a very dark view of it. Is that how you're seeing it from your seat as you drive, and meeting these people in the community? What's your perspective?
Oh, for sure, the same. Medical's so important because these patients need medicine like right now, but I'm on this bus driving around because we need all these we need to educate the masses because we have to end this federally because we cannot keep sending people to jail and destroying lives over and over again. When we planned this tour and, it was exciting and teamed up with a lot of organizations across the map and, such exciting, beautiful things, well then it was kind of funny because I've always said, since I got gifted the bus in October that this is God's bus and he wants his plant free and this is all, it's all been his gifts that, working. And what's funny is that the tour started in April 17th and we had made it through all the states. The tour was going just as planned, very good things happening. And then some things happened. We had a reroute, and all of a sudden go to Tennessee. Well, when we were in Tennessee, the same weekend that Marilyn Green and her husband were there before they surrendered to federal prison because they were patients in an illegal state in Tennessee. And she saved her husband's life by farming him medicine, and they've been married for 30-some years, and she's a grandma and, a mom, a grandma. These are beautiful people that, I got to know and be with, and I got to hear his story. He was told he was never going to walk again, and he walks. You could never even tell. And this is cannabis. This is this plant that is being so like people that are standing up and working in, you know, getting in this industry or being patients and caregivers are getting beat up out there, and this plant does magic for people. And it did this magic for Marilyn Green and her husband, but I was there 2 weeks before they're being torn apart, not because they got a divorce. It's because our government is in our pursuit of happiness stopping it and putting two beautiful people that need each other, that count on each other to survive, that have a family, that have a dog. Now they're both sitting in federal prison. Marilyn Green's in West Virginia, and her husband is in Illinois, and they're experiencing life without each other, not just without each other the first time in so many years, but in prison, and it's disgusting and it's sick. And so, yeah, our first detour send us up to Nashville, and that's what we got, raw, you know, beside all the stories that we get at gas stations and restaurants of people's personal stories, how they're hiding it and getting better with cannabis, but they can't tell their doctors and they can't tell their family members, but they tell us because we have this big green bus and it's safe to tell the truth on. And over and over again, and then we hit these whammies like Marilyn Green and her family, and then soon after that, you know, we were back on track and back on tour, and we were at the Indianapolis 500, and that was when Kari Boiter reached out to us, and she saw that after the Indianapolis 500, we were taking a few days to Chicago, and she asked us if we could detour to be there for Jerry Duvall, who I had been praying for months in his family. So, of course, we made the detour to Detroit to be there for his family. So there again, you know, the bus was put in a position where, you know, I'm experiencing life with beautiful people that have no business going through what they're going through right now. And that's, you know, right here in Michigan. And it's like since then, it's like the universe has taken control of like the tour for a minute and has like, you know, jolted it around to where, yeah, not only, you know, did me getting this bus come from me helping so many patients get off pills and get cannabis magic in their lives and feeling better and better lives going, you know, I did that because I'm a victim of the drug war, and it makes me, you know, I love knowing that, you know, it is the truth, but then this bus has also taken me to again and again, this plant does magic, and the drug war destroys people making the magic happen, and it's disgusting. And that's what the tour. I am on a mission just to tell people the truth about hemp, cannabis, what is happening because this plant is illegal to people every day. Because more and more people need to know, because we need more and more people doing something about it.
All right, so listen, so I got from your explanation that this bus has some spirituality. You refer to it as God's bus, God wanting the plant, his plant, or her plant to be free. I heard you reference the bus as being the truth bus because people only tell the truth, or people will tell the truth on the bus. So we've talked about this gloom and doom, and I sense that you're carrying some responsibility of trying to break us out of that and pass the message along, and you're bringing a message of education because, as we say day in and day out on the show, the medicine and the science and the truth in the long run will prevail. You can't beat it. It's unbeatable and unpenetrable, and we know and they know what the truth is. So it's a question of getting the message out and getting it integrated into the conversation. We know that 51% or more, somewhere around there, of people across the country believe in some concept of reform, possibly legalization, and overwhelmingly, I think the numbers are 65-70% now nationally believe in medical cannabis, with our 19th state just enacting a law. So the question is, what is the reaction? Forget let's float out into another state, one that's new fertile ground, and you're interacting with the local community and trying to explain about the benefits of cannabis and whatever level it may be, primarily medical, let's say, what are the reactions you're getting in that, new environment where, there's the, challenge
all ages of all walks of life love what we're doing. Police all over this nation that pull my bus over because, they got to know what we're doing. But when I tell them what we're doing and they ask their questions, policemen all across this nation are signing my bus, are taking pictures by the bus, are wishing us good luck, are telling us their stories on why they want this drug war to end and why they want people to quit getting arrested. And what I'm finding, people all along the country want this, and they don't know that they can help. And they think the only way that they can help is if they do something crazy like jump on a big old green bus. But I'm on that green bus letting them know ways that they can get involved without even ever telling anybody their business, and they can help move this and push it. And I'm also letting people know, there's tons of people that get on the bus, and they're willing to sign a petition and stuff because they know it helps with cancer, and that's enough for them. But those same people need to know the drug war. They need to know what hemp can do, and they need to know that everyone sick in their family can benefit from cannabis.
Let me ask you this. I'm kind of curious. When you have this positive encounter with the law enforcement community, it's when they've pulled you over, probably for driving as any person would with due care and caution. And this encounter you experience, is it before or after they've had an opportunity to search the bus and pat everybody down?
They do not search my bus.
Okay.
We do not carry any medicine on the bus, but I exercise my rights in fullest extent, and they've been respected to date. We do make sure that, we videotape just in case our rights are violated, but it's very important to me that if our rights are ever violated and there is a search done without my consent, that there is nothing that they find, so then I can show that, the waste of taxpayers' money and stuff. So it's very important to me to give a positive that, that I am doing what I'm saying I'm doing. This is an educational tour, and we're just wanting to tell people the truth. I can't drive around in a green marijuana bus with a bunch of marijuana on it, and I'm not going to. And police respect, I think they know I'm telling the truth when I tell them that, no, there's no medicine on the bus. And when they ask if they can get on the bus to look around, when I tell them no, they listen because I know I can tell them no.
It's very interesting, and you're talking about educating, and you're talking about, I guess there's almost like a written rule that if someone is going to drive around in a bus that is labeled CannaBus and looks like a bus with marijuana leaves and suggests that there's marijuana that's going to be on it, they're not going to have it on it. Like that would be the suggestion the police would even think. Like there's no way that they would actually have marijuana, drive around a bus like that and have marijuana. I would think there's almost like in some places, but I want to come back to something you said, but I do want to just let our listeners know in case everybody else. We are talking with Stacy Theis. She's a marijuana activist, writer, promoter, and developer of the West Valley NORML and Cannasense program, and the owner of the CannaBus, which is being driven around the country. We're hearing stories from her. I want to take a minute to do almost what I would call a public service announcement based on something you said, and we can bring it to our community based on CannaBus and Comorn Law and Planet Green Trees, which is that you mentioned that you are videotaping encounters with law enforcement and roadside stops. If everybody did this, things would change. I will tell you that the ability, and as the Supreme Court has ruled in public places, the videotaping of with cameras or whatever videotaping equipment or audio one may wish, they may, from whatever vantage point, so long as it's not interfering with the police's interactions, they can videotape. And doing so is oftentimes the strongest resource that you can have to defend your Fourth Amendment rights. And I can't emphasize that enough. So obviously you're intelligent in that regard, or the foresight, or maybe you talk to a lawyer, or maybe whatever. But it's smart, and I can't tell you the number of times that the case hinges on the officer's word against the driver's word, and for purposes of legal decisions where a judge is deciding, and it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, it's a difficult standard. But if you've got your own evidence that speaks for itself, you don't need to rely on what anybody says. Anyways, I'm glad you brought that up. But tell us more about some of the other projects you're involved in. I know you've got this West Valley NORML in the Cannasense program. Please elaborate on that a little.
Well, West Valley NORML, when I was in, I started out of Arizona, and I was doing the West Valley NORML meetings in Phoenix, Arizona, before I got gifted to CannaBus and started being busy with the tour. But and then Cannasense, I started Cannasense in 2011 after I attended Oaksterdam University in Oakland, California. I'm sure you're familiar with Oaksterdam because they come here.
We had Sky Jones on a few weeks ago, and I was just talking to Chad about the owner's name. I just was watching Richard Lee, that whole story, and just I get arrested. Terrible story, but yes, it is a educational institution, to say the least.
All those people that you just mentioned, I hold on the highest pedestals. You don't even understand. I went to Oaksterdam. They taught me so much. And then they had just opened their museum and encouraged us to go check it out when I was taking Oaksterdam classes. And there they had a memorial to my Uncle Gary in their museum. And it kind of, along with the education and all the truth that I was learning and being very angry about, and then going into the museum and seeing that people all the way in California, cared enough about my uncle who was shot in 1993 to put a memorial up meant a lot to me. And that kind of fueled me to go grab my cousin and get him out to Oaksterdam too. And then with that, we formed Cannasense based on the...
Favor, back up a little bit, because I wasn't aware of some of the things. And you had mentioned a few times that you inherited, how you came into the responsibility, I should say, of the possession of the bus. Will you give our listeners a little background on that and how that happened, please?
Yeah, well, me and my cousin started Cannasense, and he's from Kentucky, and I was in Arizona. And what Cannasense was meant to be is bring the education out to communities, festivals, biker rallies. I was just out everywhere telling people the truth and what had happened, and it was growing patients right and left because people were asking me, well, will it work for this? And then I was going to their homes, teaching them, getting their medical cards, and helping them get better. Well, friends of mine that I gained through doing Cannasense stuff in Arizona, we were all together when the CannaBus went up for sale on eBay out of North Carolina, and we were all devastated because we were probably the biggest West Coast fans. And they were on their way to relocating in Hawaii at the time, and they went out for lunch, and they sold their Suburban and came back to my house and told me to buy the CannaBus because no one else should have it but me, and then they wouldn't feel bad about moving to Hawaii and not helping me anymore. So that's how the CannaBus landed in my hands, and it landed in my hands. This all happened 3 days before last year's National NORML Conference in L.A. that I was already on my way to. So everybody, that I ran into and knew at NORML, I let them know that the CannaBus, I was working on picking up the CannaBus. So then that's when it became a unity bus and everybody's bus, because NORML organizations all over the map, ever since day one, they've been putting things together, been excited about the bus. They jump on the bus. We go to their hot spots and their colleges and places when we come through town, and we get, we just educate all night because people just flood the bus, and you're just able to let everybody know where to go, what to do, and it's just so much awesomeness that it just kind of went crazy. So then we knew just picking up the bus last October and bringing it back to Arizona for 14 days. We just knew that we couldn't, sit and wait to figure out what to do with the bus, that no matter what we had to do, we had to keep the bus rolling to help the momentum of all the organizations grow, to keep the momentum going and the freedom going while we fight all these battles that we're doing. The bigger we are, the stronger we are.
All right, listen, I know you mentioned you mentioned your relative here that has been shot, and there was a memorial, and we sort of backdrop to that. It's obviously something very painful, but would you mind sharing your reference to that?
In 1993, my Uncle Gary, who was a very beautiful man, I know this because I was his niece, so I know the truth versus the police and the reporters and everything else. But my Uncle Gary, decorated sharpshooter, Purple Heart Vietnam veteran, who had got off all alcohol and VA pharmaceuticals in his life through God and growing cannabis in his garden, was shot down by the Kentucky State Police by 9 exploding bullets in front of my baby cousin, who was 4 years old at the time, and his mama. And they shot my Uncle Gary right in front of him. My Aunt Mary Jane was grazed in the head with a bullet. The whole 7 hours, why they had roadblocks set up, not letting media in, the house surrounded, not talking to my Uncle Gary whatsoever, just surrounded with helicopters for 7 hours before they threw a smoke grenade in his face and blew him away with exploding bullets. They justified it. They lied. They said that a crazed Vietnam veteran Kentucky State Police had to shoot down a crazed Vietnam veteran holding his family hostage, protecting his marijuana crop. And the truth is that my aunt and my cousin were trying to leave, and the police wouldn't let them. My cousin was a mediator for the Kentucky State Police, and they wouldn't let him. He was off duty at the time, and he came to the roadblocks, and they would not let him pass the roadblocks to talk to to mediate with his own family, because there was no mediation needing to be done. But that happened to my family, and I left Kentucky not long after that because I couldn't raise my daughter in Kentucky after that. So I went to Arizona, and in the meantime, my baby cousin Jake, he grew up, he lost his speech for several years. He almost died because he tried to starve himself to death at 4 years old after his dad died. And they've lived a very hard life. This is what the drug war does. And in my mind, it doesn't matter if you shoot somebody with 9 exploding bullets or put them in prison for 25 years, you're doing the exact same thing, or 10 years. You're doing the exact same thing to children and to families that you are doing. It's the same thing, and it's horrible. And these children that are victims of these drug war and these raids, all this stuff going on in Washington, that these are people, and these people have families, and these families have children. All this stuff these kids are having to deal with because of this drug war against this precious plant is going to affect them the rest of their lives. And we have got to stop hurting children and shooting them in the foot for their lives straight out of the gate over a plant that we all know does so much good and has no reason to be causing so much bad to families and children over and over again. And
very well said.
It's just important.
It is, and you've demonstrated extreme passion and obviously sense of.
I didn't know until Oaksterdam that it wasn't just Kentucky BS. I did not know until I went to Oaksterdam, because I wasn't someone that I've always done my thing with cannabis, but it was my own personal business, something I hid, something I survived, something I moved away from having to fear and just being private and careful. And then I go to Amsterdam and I learned it wasn't personal. It wasn't a mistake that day. It is on purpose. Every single day, all across the nation, has been happening for years and years and years. And even as we get medical, legal, and people better and better, it continues to happen. And I'm going to keep the bus going until it stops.
Hallelujah. Yeah, amen. That's what I got to say. Listen, it's been fantastic talking to you. We got to move on, though, Stacey, and I look forward to hopefully talking to you again. And please continue to keep in touch with us here at Planet Green Trees. Your journey is a fascinating one. I know people are very interested. So thank you again, our listeners, Stacy Theis, the CannaBus.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for having Kari, and thanks for doing this show. You don't understand how important it is to everyone out here.
I appreciate that. All right. Have a great night. We are about 40 minutes left. I see my next guest clients are in the queue. Please hold. We're going to take a quick break and come back. You're listening to Planet Green Trees, 1-347-326-9626. The producer is suggesting that we may go over 5 or 10 minutes just to get everything in. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. And we will be right back.